All welcome. Happy Tuesday. So excited to kick off this week's session. I think for the last couple months now, I have been connecting with and chatting with and getting to know Siobhan Human and Clare Kilmartin from Dublin Tech Summit. They are brilliant at what they do, and I'm so excited for what they have to share today. We're going to be talking about what happens when speakers collide at Dublin Tech Summit, and this is in part an in-progress research thesis that Siobhan has been working on around the impact that can happen when not only our audience comes together at events, but what happens when speakers forge relationships and connections and have experiences with each other backstage. And we're also going to talk about the event content strategy and the speaker strategy for Dublin Tech Summit and what the team here is doing from a cultural and an art standpoint as well. So, tons of rich ground to cover. Siobhan, Claire, welcome.
Thanks a
Thank you
million.
for having us, Brian.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Thanks for joining. This is going to be a lot of fun. I think to maybe like set the stage and set some context, Claire, um, from what I've learned from the two of you and following along your event is in a couple months here. So you all are in the thick of event planning mode. You've Dublin Tech Summit's really established itself as Ireland's premier tech event. And, I'm curious if you can just give us some context in terms of how the event has evolved since you've come on board and how does the event distinguish itself from other tech conferences globally?
Yeah, so I came on board in 2022 for Dublin Tech Summit. So this will be the fourth one now that I've been working on for 2025. So I suppose 2022 was straight off the back of COVID. And there was a lot of really enthusiastic, eager people being let out of the pen. And so going from that then into 2023, there was quite a big shift in terms of um, the need to attract people to attend, reestablishing what the tech summit was. I think in 2022, it was just make the event happen. Whereas
Mhm.
2023, 2024, we've very much been more strategic and looking at like where we're going, what we want to be. Um, I suppose the big thing is Ireland is like we have a population of less than 6 million, which is there'd be small US cities bigger than our whole country population. So yeah, we don't have the infrastructure to run 40,000, 60,000, 80,000 person events. And we don't want to. Like we pride ourselves on not being a cattle market, I suppose, and providing a relaxed environment. And I think quality over quantity
Mhm.
pin a lot of what we do as well. So I know like Siobhan has an opinion on this one as well.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose just going on with what you said, Claire, what we strive to do, and what I always tell my speakers is we like to go for more of a boutique type of style with the summits. And the general consensus that I always get from the speakers, and we book in between, I'd say 200 to 230 speakers, is that they always say to me, Siobhan, the vibe is here, the buzz is here, it's exciting, but it's still the perfect size for us to network and to make those matches that we need to make, that you're not walking for an entire day to get to the other side of the room. So they can still make those contacts within Dublin Tech Summit. And I think that's quite a nice kind of unique selling point, that we found that sweet spot with the size that we have at Dublin Tech Summit with the audience and the attendees.
Yeah, so like we're just for the people watching there, we're about 8,000 plus for Dublin Tech Summit over 2 days.
Nice. Really nice. Yeah, I like the balance you're striking between quality of speakers, quality of content, but then also quality of experience. I think something else that we're hearing overall, like we were at a dinner last week with about uh 50 event leaders, event content leaders, and they were talking about how important it is for them right now to actually be focusing on how do we create more unique, differentiated, intimate experiences. So I love that you're kind of you're threading that needle really powerfully. I'd love to dive into the speaker selection and content strategy. And maybe, Siobhan, where you can kick us off is you've put in a lot of work. And I know, like Claire, you also have some really interesting real life lived experiences here that I want to dig into. But you're really looking into how speakers act as catalysts for innovation. And I'm curious, can you let us into your theory? And then, kind of as a part two, I'm curious, how does this actually influence the way that you select speakers?
So, my thesis and the current research that I'm looking at doing is how speaker interactions at technology conferences actually drive innovation. And what happens after the event takes place? Does that innovation actually carry on through? So three kind of key aspects I'm looking at is the physical and the environmental spaces and how that could influence collaboration. Also, pre-existing networks versus existing relationships, and then that knowledge transfer between established and emerging speakers. And it's really, really interesting just in terms of what it is that I'm pulling up, because I do a load of research, for all of my speakers, and I don't just look at their backgrounds and their qualifications and the size of the company, but what I really look at is that mix of authenticity and how good are they at telling a story. So, couple of things here is, you know, uh, uh, we would look at the talks, and obviously, what do we want the talks to be about? The talks are essentially about solving problems and what the audience is going to get out of that. So, the speakers that I pair up with, they need to give different perspectives and different approaches to solving that problem. And I would say one of the most popular talks that we had from last year, just to use as an example, was the chief advisor for innovation and AI from NASA and the co-founder of Oculus. And I paired the two of
Mm,
them together to speak about what's coming up next for AI. And we had two completely different points of view. One coming from space tech and all this amazing innovation that NASA is doing. And then you had this speaker from Oculus that has worked across numerous movies talking about Terminator 2 and the technology even back then that he used on that movie.
mm.
And that made for a really compelling and interesting discussion. So that is something that I strive to do for 2025. Mix the speakers up. Obviously, they still need to match in some contexts, but they don't need to be exactly the same in terms of background and what it is that they do for a living.
That's incredible. What have you seen at Dublin Tech Summit in the past? Like, those interactions are happening in real time. Like, what has been are there any other examples that you can paint that have shown when maybe two varying perspectives or two different areas of expertise have actually come together to result in something after the event because the interaction took place?
Yeah, so I think, and again, this goes back onto the research I'm doing. We have a mix of enterprise people, startups, founders, philosophers, professors, and you see these people coming together, and you have startups that are getting funded, and that's happening on the floor. You see enterprises meeting startups and talking about how they can potentially collaborate together across various projects. And these conversations are also going on in the speaker room. So this is exactly what my research is going to be covering, because what what the papers and what the studies show is that the attendees at tech events and world fairs have been significantly covered. But what goes on with the speakers, that hasn't been covered. So the plan is for me to
Mm,
conduct surveys and one-on-one interviews with a selected cohort of speakers from 2024 and then also 2025 to understand this better and to test my theory to see if innovation does actually happen beyond Dublin Tech Summit and if that in fact is true. Because it's one thing, obviously, seeing it on the floor and seeing it in the speaker rooms and all these little networking pockets. But what I'm not seeing is that actually taking place then thereafter the summit. And that's going to be really interesting to see those results.
Interesting. This kind of leans into another, uh, another, I think, pain point that that a lot of folks across many events are trying to solve, which is this whole idea of ROI, right? What are the key leading indicating metrics that tell us that our event is a success? And there's all the table stakes metrics that we all report on and care about. But then there are these, I would say, like more innovative arenas where what you're leaning into in terms of the value of a speaker network, the idea and relationship exchange that takes place, and being able to capture those data points in terms of what unfolds after the event. I just love that you're leaning into that because I don't think that that's happening, at least at scale in a meaningful way across the event sector, which I think is just so powerful. Um, Claire, I am curious because I correct me if I'm wrong. I believe before Dublin Tech Summit, you were very involved in medical events. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
So,
Was it medical?
so it was actually life sciences, medical, like international association conferences was
Yep.
I did before. So I worked for a professional conference organizing company, conference partners, and we essentially an agency kind of format and would have lots of different clients across loads of different sectors. So we would have collaborated quite closely with the city and with the country and different hubs within Ireland to bring international events into Dublin or into other regional hubs around the country. And so measuring ROI out of an event as from a countrywide economic perspective is also extremely difficult. So
Mm,
like, we know that a business tourist brings in more money than a leisure tourist into Ireland. That's the case in most countries, and they can measure that obviously through hotel bedroom bookings and restaurant bookings and that kind of practical side of things. But it's not measured in terms of innovation and impact that certain events, especially an event like one our event would be considered a very large event within the city of Dublin. And there's no measurement done in terms of the economic impact of the innovation that would happen at that event, whether it be speakers or attendees.
yeah. Oh my gosh. You just my brain is swirling. I want to go into innovation impact on speakers and attendees, but before we do, I am really curious to just go a little deeper on the like the economic ROI in terms of the fact that that uh business travel is more uh economically profitable and better for the local economy in the country. Like, you can quantify that through your event in terms of number of international speakers, number of international attendees outside of the Ireland and Dublin tech community that you're bringing into the country. Like, have you all ever, and I don't know what the answer might be, but I'm just kind of curious, have you ever taken those insights and that impact to help further bolster the event, whether that be to attract different sponsors or funding, or maybe something that I can't see or can't think of in real time here. But I'm just kind of curious, how do you use those insights to grow the event and build a stronger foundation for the event?
Well, I think there's a number of things here at play. So, like, obviously, if you look at the event sphere as a whole, there's a massive shift towards sustainability, obviously,
Mhm.
event impact in terms of people traveling and all of those things. There's also now has crept back in, obviously, the weariness, event weariness. so many events, new events coming all the time, people not wanting to go to everything and being more selective about their choosing. And then, so that's from the attendee side. But then there's also from a city side, like I know we're not city, countryside within Ireland, the focus is shifting on our business tourism body to focus on international conferences coming in and being more selective on the ones that do take place
Mm,
here from a sustainability point of view and the impacts that they have on the city. And so, from an organizer's point of view, to be able to quantify the value in terms of innovation within our event, as well as the overall economic impact in terms of bedrooms, eating out, all of those like cultural activities, if you can quantify the innovation within it, you're in a better standpoint to gain wider support from government bodies and things like that, because you can say, well, listen, we're really high value because of all these connections that are being made. So, like, one of the big things for us in planning Dublin Tech Summit and a big focus for us is on internationalization and the internationalization of our program content. So, we're aiming for 80% of our kind of top two stage speakers to be international.
yep.
And that's to, I suppose, generate the discussion and the debate across the Irish community with those internationals and bringing them in and making sure that our program is offering very high value within like that cohort of number of speakers, I suppose. It's a small volume of people overall coming in at the speaker level, but they're high value connections.
Mm,
Uh, so yeah.
that's incredible. I'm curious, like as you look ahead for Dublin Tech Summit, like do you have any suggestions for folks tuning in? Like, what are the what are the next steps for you in terms of calculating ROI on the event? Loaded question. I
Do you
You
want
wanna
to?
say me?
Yeah, yeah, like it's so difficult to measure, I
It
think.
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like that is one of the difficult things. Like is it and also it's a resource thing, I suppose, as well. And it's something that you need to revisit a year on, 2 years on, set your metrics in advance. And from a practical event manager point of view at that stage, we're moving on
Yeah.
to the next one and the next one. Like I personally think it needs to be looked at from a kind of a countrywide economic point of view from people like our business tourism bodies who are going to be focusing on those events and how they're measured. I don't think you can measure the ROI of events for the country's economy off only bedrooms
Mhm.
uh, and so I think it needs to have input from them as well and support there to measure the innovation. I don't think it's something you can look at like one event organizer to be able to facilitate all that measurement a year, 2 years down the track.
This is
Yeah.
the thing, and it could also be quite biased if you think about it. You know, you could have from a bias point of view, and also from an observational point of view. So it's one thing observing and going, oh, there's all this innovation going on. It's so amazing. We're so busy, but you know, for statistically speaking, and pulling that analysis, that's not something I would see happening like in only a year. That would need to be more longitudinal, happening for a certain amount of years to kind of substantiate that innovation and see, you know, it grow year on year, so to speak.
It's also so anecdotal. Like,
Mm.
Yeah.
like I feel it's a question that needs to be posed like further to the government bodies, to research bodies in terms of that measurement and pushing that back to look at.
So interesting. We're gonna have to follow up with you in like 3 years and see and
Yes.
and seeing what dots have been connected and on this front. This is incredible. I'd love to bring us back into speaker experience and event content. Um, Siobhan, I wanna tap on you quickly, but before I do, I did wonder where I was going earlier, Claire, with asking about where you were before Dublin Tech Summit was, if I recall, you had some pretty amazing examples of speakers that met or formed relationships or connections that at events that went on to make uh, advancements in research, et cetera. Like, I was just wondering if you could just paint an example for everybody on like a real world example that you've seen of speakers that have had an experience at an event that have gone on to make an advancement, have an achievement, create impact for an industry.
Um, yeah, well, without kind of naming names, I suppose it's actually within the association world and some of the very small niche associations. Like I would have done conferences on like photochemistry and like very small niche areas where you would have 500 people say coming in. Yeah, but they would all be presenting in some form of other and collaborating then across the globe on different projects or different research, which can then go on obviously to be commercially viable. So it's quite common within that association area. And like, so I know it would be natural out of something more commercial, like a tech summit, when I've seen it kind of in the past before, but it's difficult to without kind of naming names and singling people
Yeah,
out
yeah,
to
yeah.
say Mary did this with John, and it was like, and here's what they did, and that's how much it's worth now.
Amazing. Makes sense. So, okay, Siobhan, so you described the speaker experience at Dublin Tech Summit as atoms pinging off each other in this container. And I'm just curious, like, first I want to start like behind the scenes, but then I actually kind of want to pull in the audience facing levels of content and engagement. So let's first go behind the curtain. Um, what is happening behind the scenes? Like, what are you curating in green rooms, in speaker lounges, through other speaker experiences that attendees or others might not realize, um, that is helping create more energy from these atoms pinging?
So yeah, it is. It's really interesting. I would say that I have a front row ticket or seat, so to speak, to the speaker room, the VIP room backstage, and just kind of so basically the speakers room, it's set up as these different round tables, and obviously you've got the catering and everything else, but it's really interesting. You see the speakers come in and they're a little bit coy, they're a little bit shy, and then as the day kind of progresses and they've had their coffee intake, you start to see these groups forming around these round tables. You start to see these private discussions happening, on the side by the corridors, and these kind of deals being made that they're talking about. And then I think the really exciting thing for them is they finally all come together and they get to meet in person because, we're connecting them online. We're arranging prep calls for them to obviously be prepped for their talks, and they've never actually met before. So that's a really exciting piece for them. But then when they get on stage and after their talk, when they come down and they're backstage, and I mean, I've witnessed this on numerous occasions, you just see the camaraderie and the friendship that develops behind that, because it's like, oh, we've just been in front of thousands of people. And I think that's a really important narrative to me, because they support each other. And again, going back to what I'm looking at, I think that that is when true innovation can happen and can build from that, because you've built that trust and that friendship behind it also.
Just from a practical point of view, because Siobhan won't say this about herself, but from an event manager point of view, I think it's really important, obviously, to have the right person in the role, and on the team managing your speakers and the rapport that they can build up and their intuition in terms of knowing who's going to get on with who and who, like, even if they might not be on a panel together, um, like Siobhan, having done so much research on them and having spent so much time with them and given them so much time in advance of them even arriving, makes sure that they're relaxed on arrival. And, they're kind of not arriving in like stressed or head up. And one of the biggest things I think proves that is that the speakers actually are hanging out in the speaker room. They're not coming in for their talk and then going again. They're
Yeah.
coming for their talk and then they're going back to the speaker room and hanging out for the day. Like, so,
Yep.
that I think that just shows that they're comfortable And that's because of all of the groundwork that goes in before they actually even arrive. And then when they arrive, they are looked after, really personally welcomed, introduced to people that Siobhan is going to know they're going to get on with, whether they're talking with them or not. And so I think that relaxed feeling is priceless, as MasterCard would say.
Yeah.
Right. There is the ongoing joke with my surname Brian with the speakers about the human connection because I do super cheesy, but I do have this knack for introducing people and I just know who's going to connect with who. And exactly like Claire said, they don't need to be on the same talk. I just know that they're going to, get along really well and have a lot to say to each other. And I make a point of ensuring that they get introduced as and when they arrive so that they can have those interactions and those kind of those Easter egg moments, so to speak.
hmm
The Tinder of speaker world.
There
Yeah.
you go.
That's amazing. We didn't know that we would.
That one.
We didn't know that we would be swiping left and right at Dublin Tech Summit. Um, so I am curious. Well, I have two questions. There, two of them are different. If you'll humor me, Siobhan, I want to ask Claire. Uh, what are like if you were to look at, knowing what Siobhan does and how well she does it for you, what are like the three key traits that make a fantastic event manager?
Um, so for Siobhan, it's program manager. So like they're very separate, obviously, like
Yeah.
event manager, logistics, all of that. So I think traits, obviously, you need to have an interest and a passion in the area because it's extremely heavily research based. So a really good researcher, um, and that intuitiveness is really important, and somebody who's able to pick up on the trends and what's coming up, because obviously you're starting to plan your program a year in advance at least. And so, especially in a sector like the tech sector, which is like changing hour by hour, minute by minute, to have somebody who is able to pick up on the nuances within the news, the nuances within press releases that are coming out of certain companies, and being able to make the connections under certain topics to look at. Like one of the big things we're looking at is like, where's the debate? Where's the problem? Where are those controversial topics and themes? And let's not shy away from them. Let's put them on the program and get them like air the dirty laundry.
Yeah.
and,
Mhm.
um, and so to be able to have the confidence and the ability to go, okay, yeah, no, we're going to do this. It might be a little bit hot, but let's do it and let's go for it. So like they're all really important. She's irreplaceable.
And Brian, if I could just interject there, exactly going on what Claire said, I think it's super important that you want to drive discussions and debates that are controversial, topical, commercially hot. I feel that audiences, they crave substance, they crave originality. So of course, and any other speaker manager or program manager will be researching what other events are doing. And I obviously have a look at what all the competitors and everyone else is doing. And I try to do something completely different and stay away from that generic kind of let's just do a keynotes on innovation, so to speak. So I want the conflicting points. I want those
Mhm.
little moments of friction on stage. I want assumptions challenged and for the audience to be challenged also going, hey, I never thought of that before. For an example, I'm working on something around the AI energy crisis and also the cultural backlash around DE and I and what's going on in that. But like Ryan, these talks are very risque. But
Mhm.
again, it's about finding not common ground. I want to create more of that spark, that what's going to ignite that change, so to speak.
Yeah, I love that. Are you constantly pushing this format? Like, I'm kind of wondering, strategically, like, what's the sweet spot between it could be from a number of ways. It could be number of speakers and voices on stage to depth and level of content from, basic, intermediate, advanced. Like, what is strategically like that sweet spot that actually pushes that boundary that you're tapping on?
I think it's to be very honest, it's also a level of comfort. I've been doing this now for a
Yeah.
number of years that I want to be more risque. I want to be more controversial. It's also I have a very good network of C-suite speakers, high profile people that I speak to and I have these conversations with, and we'll go for drinks or dinner. And I'm like, I've got this crazy idea. What do you think about this? So yes, it's researching. Yes, it's being aware of what's going on around you and geopolitically and the rest of the world. But it's also speaking to different speakers and people that are on the speaker circuit and them giving me advice, going, Siobhan, that's amazing. Go with it. Or let's make it even more controversial. Why didn't you add this in? And that's really how these it's really happening organically for me this year, Brian. I must be honest. But I think I'm onto something with kind of going this route. And people, you'll see when the agenda obviously goes live in the next couple of weeks, people are going to be like, oh, are we going there? Are we actually going to talk about this?
That's awesome. Well, I love the serendipitous organic nature of it, but I'll even push a little bit and say like I do think that like it is programmatic, right? It's part of it's the human element of your research where you're actually actively and consciously like in market, in debate, in discussion with the leading voices, minds, and opinions that are year round informing and pushing on how you're going to mold your program and your content strategy.
Yeah.
I think it's brilliant.
I love
I
my God.
I'm curious. You have these moments, right? You create debate, you create you like deepen understanding. You might even make people a little uncomfortable and kind of force them to shift their perspective, open their mind, understand something from a different point of view. This is all really, really valuable. Is there anything that you're doing from a content perspective to expand the lifetime of that content beyond the event?
Yeah, would like yeah. So I think that's something that we've constantly been trying to improve upon. So we obviously record all our sessions off the main stages, and we do make that content available afterwards.
Mhm.
Um, but also like we've been running free webinars as well, which we're going to continue into next year. So what we do is what we did after last year was analyze the data out of session attendance, which we're able to see from the app. So we're able to see the session attendance from the app, and then we're able to see the data on the session views post event of certain recorded sessions. And so we can identify like, where interests may be, or also we're getting feedback of the like post event surveys and things like that, or queries that came into the inbox. And so taking all of that knowledge, I suppose we then are guiding where our free webinars go, and they are us using content that we've already worked on and generated on, but we might expand. So if there was something that was like a hot topic on the stage, it was on a particular topic, like, and there's no way around this. Like we were getting feedback last year, like that session wasn't long enough. They were only just getting into it and the session was over, but like then you don't have time to give it all of the time that it might need. And so to look at like, okay, where are we getting that feedback from? And let's do a more in-depth webinar on it, or maybe a two-part series. And that's part of our um giving back to the tech community as well. They're free webinars. We record our sessions, they're free to access afterwards, and that's using our content there. And we have a podcast booth in
Cool.
Dublin Tech Summit. And so we basically, this kind of came from, do you know, Glastonbury, the music festival
Yeah.
in UK? Okay, so Glastonbury is streamed live. A lot of the big bands over the BBC, like the English Broadcasting Channel, and they have a channel called BBC Three, which is kind of the funky behind the scenes sort of channel, and they have uh, Glastonbury off stage where like they'll have artists who have just come off stage and are they chat to them afterwards. and might talk about what they've talked about or talk about something else. Sometimes we have journalists hosting podcasts within that and things like that. And so, like, all those podcasts go up onto Spotify then as well.
Hmm.
They, we've kind of a back catalogue of the past 2 years of podcasts that went out during the event as well. So we try and do a lot of things like that with content. And like, there's a couple of podcasts I've listened back to a few times that are still really relevant now, like even going back to 2023 content. So it's, yeah, I'm trying to maximize the content during the session.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. I love the podcast webinar channels essentially kind of like starting to branch into an omni-channel content distribution strategy. I I kind of have like I have a twofold question. One is, and this like Siobhan or Claire, we're atoms pinging now, so we'll just we'll just keep going. Um, I'm curious, like, how are the like post session podcasts? Like, are you strategically leveraging them to continue to deepen the content? Like, I'm just kind of curious on the strategy for that side podcast session. And then I'm even curious on, um, like, is there an omni-channel distribution strategy where, you've now collected this podcast content? Like, how is this being used from a marketing perspective?
Um, yeah, like it is part of, what content can your resources generate and use wisely? Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, when you have people at the event there, yes, you want them on main stage, but why not have them interviewed one on one in that intimate podcast like environment, and then use that content later on. We also then would look at like utilizing our speaker network to do blog posts or thought leadership kind of pieces for the Dublin Tech Summit website, but also we work in tandem with Business and Finance magazine brand in Ireland. And so that's a more business focused media platform. But
Mhm.
the now business and tech are just be like kind of mainstream old school business and tech are really just like colliding so much more.
Cool.
So there's like another form of distribution there, which is reaching a new audience from the content we're producing in Dublin Tech Summit. Um, and I think one of the big things, like for me, is accessibility, education, and that's why all the content will go out free. We try and keep our ticket prices at a really reasonable level, for accessibility, and attendee experience and network and all of
Mhm.
the engagement measures. And part of that is the provision of content on an annual basis across the year, not just at the summit.
Yeah. And just from a strategic point of view, just with the content that goes on there, um, what usually happens, Brian, is I would first build out obviously the first draft of the agenda, and that would be forever changing right until the day of Dublin Tech Summit. But out of those specific talks, I could also then identify what we could expand on further, because again, I know, for example, if there was something about quantum or whatever the case may be, you can only talk so much about that topic on stage. So I would then contact one of the speakers on that talk and see if they would like to expand on it further within the podcast booth, knowing from the year before that that specific topic or theme was really hot. We just don't have enough time for them to speak on stage about it.
Yeah.
Incredible.
We also, as well, last year introduced what we call our Tech Hive stage, which is a really small stage which allows for hour long sessions, and it's like silent disco style, headphones on, and some of the speakers who are speaking maybe on panels or firesides on the bigger stages may go on and do a tech hive where you're talking to, like, the developers and the programmers, and they're getting into the real nitty gritty questions and coding and all of those things on that stage as well. So last year was the first launch of it and it was really, really popular.
Right.
And so we're expanding the capacity on that stage as well, but also rolling out that content on another way.
I love the content innovation. Like Siobhan, I love the way that you're strategically stewarding the right speakers in certain topics and pulling them into other activations at the event. I'm curious, are you leveraging your speakers and your speaker network for activations outside of the event, like beyond the event? I'm kind of thinking from like a 365 content
Yeah.
strategy standpoint.
Absolutely. I mean, look, we have a number of speakers that are involved with either local tech communities, international tech communities. Just for example, Women in AI, which has, I think, over 200,000 members worldwide. We have another one, Women in AI Governance. So, what I'm trying to say is these speakers have their own communities or have founded their own tech organizations, and it kind of infiltrates into that also. And going back to what Claire said about Dublin Tech Week, that would then kind of sideline nicely into Dublin Tech Summit, because they would want to have an event with Dublin Tech Week, knowing that they're going to be speaking at Dublin Tech Summit during the course of that week. So again, everything just weaves in really nicely.
Yes.
Amazing.
So
Amazing.
Dublin Tech Week is a new initiative this year, that is us coming together with the tech community, but there's a huge number of side events outside of Dublin Tech Summit happening that week. And so we've all come together to basically have a listing of those events so that if you are coming into Dublin for the Tech Summit, you will be able to look up the Tech Week website and see, oh, well, look, if I come in 2 days earlier, like there's a hackathon or there's a networking event for cybersecurity, there's a blockchain event. Like there's loads of stuff happening from the 23rd of May to the 30th of May. And Dublin Tech Summit is kind of the big event that's on that week.
Amazing. Do you,
Yeah.
I guess Chris just asked a question in the chat, which is kind of similar to what I just asked you, but are you finding that speakers are really open to participate in these other activations beyond the event? He said it seems like they'd be very motivated to share their expertise more than just on stage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Sorry, Claire, you can, I can start and you can maybe just jump in. Again, it depends on the relationship with the speaker. It depends on what their goals and objectives are. So if you can obviously have that discussion with them beforehand, and essentially it's helping them identify what other opportunities they have on or off stage that they could participate in. And then kind of them realizing, oh, okay, so I'm not just coming to speak at Dublin Tech Summit. I can do this, I can do that. So it's working in tandem with them. And it's also working in tandem with the local tech community.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think it's important like that you're creating other side events or activations or working with the community to do that, it's something that they want to go to, that they're not feeling like they're a cash cow being rolled out across the city. Like when we're looking at like the activity potential around our speakers and what they could be invited to do or what they might like to do as well. Like we're looking at using the cultural venues within Dublin. Like a lot of people fly in for these events and they get to the airport, they get to the conference venue, they go to the hotel, go to bed, go home the next day, and they don't see where they've been. And they're back in the airport and they're back somewhere else again. And so getting people out of the actual conference venue is really important to us. Dublin,
Mhm.
so lucky we have amazing, amazing cultural venues. And they're all on the doorstep like of the conference venue where we are, the RDS. And so it's really accessible for us to be able to bring people to different places, and just by providing that inspirational, relaxed cultural environment, then networking will just happen by itself. Like we would
Mhm.
speaker reception. We've done it in the Museum of Literature last year and the year before, which is amazing. It's got like James
Wow.
exhibitions. It's a fabulous venue right in the middle of Stephen's Green in the city centre, and just the venue itself breaks the ice.
Yeah.
uh, and so planning that kind of way, and I always think like, where would I like to go first? If I was going to see a city, like, you don't want to be stuck in a conference venue all day.
But then again, sorry, Claire, just going back to that on the speakers reception, and Brian, you would see afterwards, it's these serendipitous encounters and these kind of sporadic moments where afterwards it's, you know, you'll go for a last minute drink or you'll go for an impromptu dinner or something like that. And that's where the business and the friendship side kind of collide and come together in those moments.
Yeah.
I love the way that you are weaving in the cultural component of the city, of the country, as well as, like, highlighting the arts, science, literature, and, like, creating a speaker experience in those spaces outside of the container of the event, which adds value back into all the people that you're inviting to attend the event. I mean, it's just it's beautifully done, beautifully orchestrated.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Um, I have one last question. I know that we're just about at time. Um, and so I just am curious, as you look at, the events coming up in the next couple of months here, I'm really curious, like, what's one bold move or experiment you're planning this year that's pushing the boundaries of what the event can be? I'm just kind of curious, since we have you in real time, right? Like you said, the agenda and programs going live shortly. So what's present? What's in front of you in terms of where you're continuing to push?
I think, well, from my side, it's to stop playing it safe. The future of events and the event content lies in embracing discomforts and tackling the controversial, the polarizing, the uncomfortable truths that are shaping our industries today. So take chances, don't play it safe, and also suppose reviewing the outcomes that are going to be coming from my final thesis. It's going to be really interesting to see that and evaluate that, so we know what we can use going forward for next year.
Yeah. And I think,
Amazing.
yeah, from my point of view, it's with Dublin Tech Week. It's the inaugural one this year. So it's a bit of an experiment for both the city stakeholders and the tech community and private enterprise. Like Dublin is host to 16 of the 20 top global tech companies, as have their European hubs here. And then we also have 272 small businesses. Like there was 23,000 startups out of Ireland in 2024.
Whoa.
um, and so, like, if you look at, like, say, Sam Altman saying that, one person could potentially run $1 billion business using AI tools now, like, we could have 272,000 billion-dollar businesses being run out of Ireland. So, I think supporting the community there, and looking at how we can continue to foster collaboration within the community while keeping open channels of communication and debate, and having that environment that it's okay to, not go with the status quo.
Hmm, brilliant. Well, we're cheering you on into 2025 Dublin Tech Summit. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the fact that you so generously gave your time, your talent, your experience, your expertise, especially when you're in the thick of event planning. And it is not lost on me, and I know it's not lost on anyone that's tuned in today. So thank you both so much.
Thank you, Brian.
I
You,
do want everyone to know, I'm going to share my screen here really quickly, that we have a special session board discount for Dublin Tech Summit. If anyone wants to have the rich cultural and innovative experience that's curated at Dublin Tech Summit, the team here is offering 50% off tickets for the session board community. And we'll also share this code with you via email as well. So want to let everyone know that that generous offer is available. And Siobhan, Claire, thanks so much for
Thank you so
joining
much,
us.
Brian.
thank you.
Brilliant.
Amazing.
Till next
Thank
time, folks. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.